Please ignore the police sirens in the back. It's a pretty crime-filled day here in Vancouver. And I know some of y'all might be going out there and saying, hey Lego, they're going to arrest you for the clickbait. No, this actually isn't clickbait this time. We have two interesting moves that I wanted to talk about today. One is a waiver claim between the Minnesota Wild and the Edmonton Oilers, and the other is a trade. Yeah, we're getting trades here on a bright and early Wednesday morning. Okay, it's almost noon, so maybe not too deep into the morning, but we're talking about 4 teams because there are 2 transactions. Let's start out today with the Edmonton Oilers claiming defenseman Travis Dermott from the Minnesota Wild. And this is a nice little exchange. It's a how you do between both of these teams, using Travis Dermott as the vehicle for said how do you do. The reason I say that is because Travis Dermott was an Edmonton Oiler earlier this season. He had 10 games played, 0 points. Last year he had 7 points in 50 games played with the Arizona Coyotes, but Travis Dermott was a part of an Edmonton Oilers squad that needed some extra support on their blue line. Let's actually pull up the Oilers and their line combinations here. Edmonton had some pretty difficult ways in managing their D pairings at the start of the year. You have this core right here. Stecher and Edmondson are the other 2 guys that were in those vulnerable spots. You had Travis Dermott that was also rotating around there. He wasn't amazing. 10 games played, as we had said. Not the best in the world, but certainly a fine replacement-level NHL defenseman. Which is why, when Dermott got sent to waivers, he was claimed immediately by the Minnesota Wild. Why? Because the Minnesota Wild have had their own issues on defense, not in terms of the talent quality, but in terms of who is available. If we go over to the Minnesota Wild on their page over here, yeah, this decor looks pretty fine, with the exception of maybe Declan Chisholm in the bottom pair, but Brodin, he was out for a while. Spurgeon, he was out too. Lots of guys missing time on this Minnesota Wild decor, so they just needed bodies. This is why Travis Dermott was a very valuable claim back in December. He was claimed all the way back then. He played all the games that he did, sat out for the 4 Nations and the games before and after then pretty much, because they had guys coming back from injury. Now he was placed on waivers once more, and the Edmonton Oilers said, hey, we want to get our guy back. Let's get him back. Now he's in Edmonton one more time. Not really the most peaceful of moves for Travis Dermott, going from Edmonton to Minnesota back over to Edmonton, especially during this snowy season, but I mean, he's a pro hockey player. He can deal with it. This, of course, will be helping out the Oilers and their own depth heading into the 2025 Stanley Cup Playoffs. I think it's still fair to say that the Oilers could use some more defensive capability. They might not still be interested in keeping this core. They might be interested more so in getting another guy. If they get a David Savard or somebody like that, then it pushes Emerson and Stecher down the depth chart. Travis Dermott can play both sides, even though he is a left-handed guy. So there's a little bit of versatility there. I've always liked the mobility that Dermott plays with. He's kind of small, but he's kind of shifty, and maybe once in a while he'll make a big oopsie that results in a big highlight reel goal against scored by, let's just say, the Montreal Canadiens. But anyways, Travis Dermott over to Edmonton is a pretty interesting move, but it's not the only move that I wanted to talk about in this video. Let's scroll up just a little bit and talk about this trade. Take a look at this. It's between the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Nashville Predators. No, this is not a Stamkos McDonough deal. There are no reunions happening here, but it's a trade involving 2 AHL guys. You have Anthony Angello, who was on Nashville, getting sent over to Tampa Bay, and you have Ylonen, who was in the Tampa Bay system, heading over to Nashville. Now, I know a lot of Canadiens fans are going to be interested in this because Ylonen was a guy that, for a good chunk of his prospect development career, us fans of the Montreal Canadiens had somewhat high hopes for. But let's talk about the trade right here. So Anthony Angello is going from Nashville to Tampa Bay. He's a 28-year-old, 6'5", 209-pound right-handed center right wing, a big forward whose contract is expiring at the end of the season. Anthony Angello, not to be confused with Tony DeAngelo, had himself 14 points in 41 games played with the Milwaukee Admirals this season. It's kind of interesting, but for a guy who's 6'5", 209, he doesn't really get as many penalty minutes as you might have expected. He has provided some decent to okay depth play in the AHL system for the Pittsburgh Penguins over the years. In the Nashville system, though, he has strictly been an AHL player. Hasn't really been the most productive the past 2 seasons, especially when you compare it to some of the other years he had. It's kind of weird, to be honest. I mean, 14 points in 41 games this year, not great. 13 points in 46 games played last year, not great. But in 22-23, he had 12 points in 17 regular season games with Milwaukee. That changed, though, in the playoffs when he only had 3 points in 16 games. He started to amp up the penalty minutes a little bit more, though, so I think that's where he was providing more value. And in Pittsburgh, he was good enough, production-wise, to actually get a few cups of coffees in the NHL. He had NHL goals. He's got 3. So this guy, Anthony Angello, is a very interesting name. I think earlier in his Pittsburgh days, he was younger, so it's like, oh, there's an argument to be made that this guy could actually be somewhat of an NHL piece. But at 28 years old, this is really just a depth pickup for the Tampa Bay Lightning in their farm system. What's interesting, though, is coming over back to Nashville, you've got Ylonen, 25-year-old Scottsdale, Arizona, USA-born guy. He's a Finn, but he was born in the U.S. 6'1", 190 right-handed guy, drafted by the Canadiens in the second round of the 2018 NHL Draft. Ylonen was somebody that a lot of Canadiens fans were paying attention to because of his play in Finland. He had a decent to okay run in the Finnish league, and eventually found himself with the Laval Rocket, where he was one of the more productive guys. He had 32 points in 39 games played in 22-23 before becoming a full-time Canadian in 23-24. 8 points in 59 games played. This is where Canadiens fans started to realize, okay, maybe the 16 points in 37 games that we had seen out of Ylonen in 22-23, maybe that's not too sustainable. Maybe that's not really this guy. Maybe he doesn't have what it takes to be a consistent 82-game NHL player. So he had 8 points. Eventually he found himself in Tampa Bay, 25 points in 47 games with the Syracuse Crunch this season. Ultimately, this is a pretty big swing for the Nashville Predators. They're taking their chance on a guy who does produce more, I would say, than Anthony Angello, but who is a lot younger and who is probably in a spot to want to show off more at the NHL level. And guess what? One of Ylonen's biggest qualities as a prospect was his goal-scoring ability. It's why he made the NHL in the first place. They wanted to see goals. Nashville can't score any goals. And I'm not going to sit here and say that Ylonen is the #1 antidote fix-all solution for the Nashville Predators. I mean, on a team with Jonathan Marchessault and Steven Stamkos, Ylonen is not going to be the savior of this franchise, but at this point, Nashville is so bad, and they can't score any goals. Luke Schenn already said it himself. They can't score goals for crap. You got to try everything at this point. And if the Tampa Bay Lightning are willing to give you a guy like Ylonen, you say, hey, he's playing in the Tampa system, so he's not really good enough to crack that team. We need goal-scoring support. We're willing to try anything. Let's trade away a big guy, a presence in the locker room, a more experienced AHL vet for Ylonen. We'll try out Ylonen in the NHL. If they don't try him in the NHL, then I'd be very interested as to why they made this trade. Actually, no, it makes sense. Ylonen's producing more than Anthony Angello, so I guess that's where the value is. But for me, I'm thinking this could be a chance for Ylonen to try to establish himself one more time at the NHL level, this time with Nashville instead of the Montreal Canadiens. So I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you're an Oilers fan, if you're a Wild fan, what are your thoughts on Travis Dermott getting claimed by the Edmonton Oilers? Wild fans, do y'all need this guy anymore? I see that Brodin's back, Spurgeon's back. These guys have been in and out of the lineup for most of the season. Like, the amount of health problems the Wild have had this year, it's insane. Not even to mention Kirill Kaprizov. Like, if only Travis Dermott could have gone out there and replaced him, right? But what are your thoughts on Dermott getting claimed by the Oilers? Oiler fans, what are your thoughts on you getting this guy back? And if you're a fan of the Predators and or the Tampa Bay Lightning's farm teams, what are your thoughts on this Anthony Angello for Ylonen swap? Let me know in the comments. What do you think? I hope you enjoyed this video. Sign on, and bye.